We harvested our sweet corn this week, so I thought I'd take the opportunity to chat to you a bit about growing corn and the different processes along the way. So my name's Hannah and welcome to the Front Garden Farm, where we grow our own food in our garden. So let's talk about the process of growing corn. Now there are two main types of corn that you would probably consider growing in a garden situation. There's the sweet corn, which is what we'll talk about mostly today because that's what we've been growing this year. But there is also a type of corn that you grow for popcorn, and that just works a little bit differently because instead of using that fresh, you would dry that out and use the dry kernels to pop for popcorn. And you can't really eat that. You can't eat that in the same way as sweet corn because it's very hard and unpalatable in that form. So we live in the West Midlands in the UK, and our growing season for corn is from about May through to September. And we tend to start our seeds off a little bit earlier, so sometime in April we will start the seeds off indoors, and then the young plants get moved out into the greenhouse. And then it's usually warm enough sometime in May. Although this year we had a particularly cold start to the season, so we didn't actually get our corn planted out until June because we had a lot of frosts all the way through May, unfortunately, this year. So we had a shorter growing season than normal. Now, sweet corn doesn't like to have its roots disturbed, and so there are a few ways of getting around that if you're not direct sowing and you're actually starting them off indoors like we tend to do. So the way we get around that is we use some plug trays which have got a little bit of a space at the bottom for the roots to grow into, and also a nice big hole at the bottom so that when the plant is ready to be transplanted, we can just push that up and then plant it straight into the soil, and it has very minimal root disturbance in that process. There are other things that you can use though. It's a great way to use recycled materials. In the past we have used toilet tubes, the cardboard tubes from toilet roll, and we just fill those with compost, plant the seeds into those, and then when you're ready to plant them out into the ground, you can just plant the whole thing and the cardboard will break down over the course of the season. We've also done a very similar thing where we've made our own little pots out of newspaper, and that works in very much the same way as that. Fill the little pot that you've created with your compost, plant the seed in, and then just put the whole thing into the ground and the newspaper will break down. So sweet corn is wind pollinated, so it needs to be planted fairly close together. Check your seed packets for the spacing required. And then we tend to also plant in like a zigzag formation in blocks. So we want to have the corn close together and in this sort of zigzag formation so that when the wind blows, the plants will become pollinated. If they're too far apart, then you'd probably have less success with your pollination rates. So if a cob is not pollinated, it will be baby corn. So the type of corn that you get in the supermarkets labelled as baby corn. And that's fine to eat too. So even if your harvest doesn't go so well and you haven't achieved that pollination, all is not lost because you can still eat those unpollinated parts of the plant as baby corn. So the sweet corn's got a male part of the plant and a female part of the plant. The male part is at the top and sort of comes down like a fountain at the top with all the little seed tassels coming off of it. And as the wind blows, the pollen comes down and lands on, hopefully, the silk of the corn, which is just sticking out of the husk on the female part of the plant. So the pollen will drop onto those silks, and each one of those silks, they're like a little thread, and they're attached into where the kernels will develop. And the kernels develop once that particular thread has been pollinated. So you may end up with some corn where some parts of the cob has been pollinated and other parts of the cob hasn't. And now some people get around this by pollinating by hand. It's not something we do. We just plant it and leave it and hope for the best. But if you want to make sure you've got more guaranteed results with the pollination, you can go and do that yourself. How do you know when sweet corn is ready to harvest? Well, the first thing to look out for is the tops of those silks, which will be sticking out of the husk. And they will start to turn a kind of browny, reddy colour and dry out. And at that point, you know that you're nearly ready and to start looking out for signs of being ready to harvest. So once you see those silks drying out at the top, you can then open a bit of the husk up, and that's your chance to see how well your cobs may have pollinated. And then take your thumbnail and dig it into one of the kernels. And hopefully one of three things should happen. You'll either get just a clear liquid coming out, and that means that the cobs are not quite developed enough yet. They need to ripen a bit further, so just leave them for longer. If you get a milky liquid coming out, that's fantastic. That means your corn is ready to harvest. If that milky liquid is very, very thick, then it's probably going over a bit. It's been left a little bit too long, so get that out of the ground and harvest it as soon as you can. So you can take off all of the husk and the cob off of each plant. You normally get, well, at least one, normally two, maybe a few more on each plant. And then you can pull the whole plant out of the ground and dispose of it. You can dispose of it in the compost, although it does take quite a long time to break down. So just bear that in mind when deciding on whether you put it in the compost or not. Treat it like a brown material if you're going to compost it. You could burn it, or you could even keep the stalks and dry them out and use them for decorations and crafting. Then you can open up each of the husks, take the sweet corn out, and you'll notice that the sweet corn is all surrounded by these silks. Now, don't throw the silks away because you can use those too. The silks are really good herbal medicine, and they're great for any conditions to do with the urinary system. It can potentially also help to lower blood pressure. And there are a few other things as well, so if you're interested in that, go and do some research and find out more about it. If you are thinking of using herbs in a medicinal way, obviously check with your doctor first to make sure it's okay for you, especially if you're already on some medication, because sometimes these things can interact. So make sure you get professional advice and help before you do that. So with our silks this year, we've dried some of them out, and we can use those to make a tea. And actually it's quite a nice tasting tea to use on its own. It's got a it does taste like sweet corn, actually. It's very pleasant. We're also in the process of making an apple cider vinegar tincture with some of the silks as well. The husks can also have a use. You could dry those out and then use them for craft projects. That's not something we've done yet. But you can see how pretty much every part of the corn plant can be used for something. So let's talk about preserving the corn. Depending on how much you've grown, you may have more than a dinner's worth. And certainly if you're looking to try and grow enough food for yourself for the whole year round, you definitely want to be able to store that long term. Now there are different ways of preserving things. You can do fermenting, you could do canning, or you can freeze it. I'll talk about freezing today because that's something that we've done and we're able to share with you and tell you about because we've got experience of it. So the way we've preserved our corn is we've blanched it. So once we've processed it, taken the husks off and you've got just your cobs ready to go, we boil those in water for about 5 minutes, take them out and then put them straight into an icy bowl of water to cool them off. And then you can do one of two things. You can either put them into the freezer as they are and then you can use them as whole cobs later. Or if you prefer sweet corn, or if you are short on space, you can cut all of the kernels off and then you've got the sweet corn product with all those individual kernels. And that's what we've done this year. We've cut the kernels off of the cob to maximise our storage space because we are a bit short on freezer space. So I hope that's helped you to hear about our journey with growing sweet corn this year. I'd love to hear your ideas about growing sweet corn. How do you use all of those different products? What do you like to make with it? What recipes do you love? You can share us some ideas in the comments below. And if you found this content helpful, then please subscribe to our channel and share with a friend as well, and help to spread the word. Well, that's all for now, and I'll see you next time.